I want to get into how I might develop a script to the scene. So a whole scripted scene. Okay. Um, so I'm just going to basically write a scene in front of you here. And now the first thing you want to kind of do before you start developing a scene is really like into a script is you really want to think about what is the point of the scene. So the core point of the scene is what happens, right? What happens in the scene. I mean, ideally before this, like I say, you'll have broken all your whole story apart. You'll broken the story in the sense that you've got now a real clear sense of how many acts you've got, what are the big moments, what's the big point of commitment, what are the big, you've designed the characters to some degree, you've plotted it out in many respects, right? Ideally, you've done a lot of work before you get to actually writing a scene. A lot of the work in a screenplay is done before you start writing a scene. There's very good reasons for that, by the way. One is that, so one simple reason is that what you'll often be hired to do if you are writing a script. So if you do this for yourself, of course, you can do whatever you want, whenever you want. But there's an easier way to do it and a harder way. So, you can do the hard way or the easy way. It's up to you when you're on your own dime. When you're on somebody else's dime, you got to do it the way they want you to do it. And they want you to do it the easy way. And the reason they want you to do it the easy way is because it allows them to pull the plug faster with less money commitment. So what you will do if you are hired to write a movie is you will write an outline for the movie first. So you'll do all that story breaking and you'll literally write a treatment, what's called a treatment document. So the treatment will summarize the story in paragraphs basically, and it'll be a document of some length, depending on how long they want it to be basically. But let's say you end up with a treatment that runs about 10 pages or so. Okay, let's imagine that you kind of condense the story and its plot into about a 10-page, single spaced 10-page document, right? You would, at the end of that process, you would deliver that document, that treatment. You would be paid for the treatment, and you'd receive a story credit on that treatment, and so on and so forth. At that point, before they have you do a script or have somebody else do a script, keep in mind, they'll decide whether they want to make that movie and or at least whether they want a script. So this allows them to kind of pull the plug. So it allows you to get some money and allows them to pull the plug and never pay you again. It allows them to fire you and hire somebody else to make a script out of this thing, a more bankable writer maybe. Or it allows you to continue hiring you if they get some interest in this story. If they can't sell or if they can't garner enough interest internally or externally in this story and this outline, this treatment, at least they didn't waste all their time writing a script, and neither did you. Again, let's fast forward. Imagine, we're in a world where we are writing a script for ourselves or for somebody else. So we've done this story breaking. We've got an outline of what we're doing beforehand. Now we've even figured out like maybe roughly the nutshell of all the scenes. It's probably going to change a little bit as you're writing the script, right? But we have got the rough strokes. We kind of know what we're writing. So on your writing time during your writing day now, you're mostly at this point, let's imagine, writing script and not necessarily tweaking the story. If that's the case, again, before you start writing a scene, you should know what the scene is in its basic way. So you should have like a sentence or two in the outline that summarizes this scene. And what that will do, typically in a good outline, is it'll indicate the change that takes place in the scene. Because for something to happen in a script or in a story, right? For something to happen in a story means something has changed. So you've got your change, right? That's what the scene is about. The question is, how do you create that change? How do you drive the scene from point A to point B and have that change take place? Well, the answer to that is the same as on the macro level of the story. On the micro level of the scene, you need a conflict that is being that is arising and resolving in the scene. Okay, a conflict that is arising and resolving in the scene, and that conflict will drive the change. Now, this conflict, like all conflicts in a story, can occur on different levels. In fact, you could have a couple levels intermingling here, right? You could have this external level of conflict where there's some outside force that is causing a problem. You could have a social level of conflict where other characters are causing problems. You can have an internal level of conflict where a person is sort of creating their own problems. You can have these levels intermingle, interlock, and so on and so forth. What you're trying to get at is not, what is happening in the whole story here, but like what's a smaller sort of moment in the story? What's a sort of smaller, self-contained, scene-contained problem or set of problems that this character or these characters are facing? So there's a few things you got to figure out, like who's in this scene, like what characters are here and now. Maybe not everybody in the movie is going to be in the scene, right? You got to figure out what the function of the scene is in terms of its place in the story. And you got to figure out like the rough, broad strokes of like what should happen in this scene. So in the scene, I'm going to write a scene that would be the first scene in a movie script. Okay, so it's the first scene. So there's a few things. I'm going to write a scene that would be the first scene of a horror story. Okay, I'm going to write an adaptation. Imagine I was adapting my graphic novel, The Eye Collector, into a movie script. Okay, let's imagine that's my sort of project here. So I got to think of a few things. In the first scene, before I start writing, I want to establish like my kind of what the scene is and what my goals are. So you should really spend part of your writing time doing this. This will really help you write the scene a lot. Spend some real time breaking the story in terms of that small scene. And there's a bunch of, and it helps to almost just get like almost checklist of things you need to accomplish in this scene. Like if you have a real clear direction, it helps quite a bit. So what I want to accomplish in this scene, because it's the first scene, right? It's the first scene of the story. I need to do a few things. One is that I want to set the tone. So I want to set the tone to the reader of the script. I want to set the tone to the audience viewing the movie, when it's done, right? So something that I'm going to do in this first scene is set a tone. Something else I want to do, and in my particular example, my tone is sort of this weird, claustrophobic world. My main character is a child. This child, Nathan. So I need to introduce, Nathan, the child. My child Nathan lives in he's a single, an only child. He's got two parents who live with him in this house, and he is a very isolated child. His parents have very much isolated him. His parents have very much created a claustrophobic environment in our particular story. It's something I won't get into, may not get into here, is that their house, all the windows have been bricked up. Like there's no windows in their house. It's a very claustrophobic environment that he lives in. And he, of course, to some degree has accepted this as his environment. This is where he's grown up and the world he knows. So for him, this is the world he knows. Again, and it's the first scene. Something I'm doing in this is I'm setting up the world. I'm setting up the tone. I'm establishing the characters. In this case, I'm going to establish Nathan and his mother and father as characters. I need to set forth their dynamics. So part of the point of the scene is to show their dynamics, how these people interact with one another. I'm therefore going to isolate, create a problem in the scene, which is that Nathan has to go to bed. His mother and his father, Nathan's mother is trying to get Nathan into bed, okay? and his father is going to delay Nathan on his way to bed and start telling him his bedtime story. But this bedtime story, is just truly disturbing to Nathan. Mother doesn't want father telling Nathan this bedtime story because it's going to keep him up. So on one level, it's a very simple, dramatic situation, right? Notice how the conflict here is just a scene conflict. It doesn't have to be a giant story conflict, right? It's not like no one's life is in danger. The danger is Nathan's gonna, not go to sleep. The scary story will keep him up. Plus, Nathan wants to stay up and watch TV. Nathan's mother. So this is the dynamic of the scene that I want to get across is like, his mother wants to put him to bed. These characters are at cross purposes, though. Nathan wants to stay up and watch TV. Nathan's mother wants to put him to bed. She wants him to go to sleep. And Nathan's father wants to tell him this terrifying story that's going to keep him awake. Okay? And his mother doesn't want him to listen to the story, but, this is a household that is kind of run by the father. So that's sort of the dynamic. So real point of the scene is to get that dynamic across and introduce these characters and this claustrophobic sort of situation to the audience. A different story, perhaps a different writer would hesitate and build this whole scene up over the course of 10, 15 minutes. I want to pack it all immediately into like 3 minutes maybe, because I don't want a whole act to do all this stuff. I just want to throw the audience headlong into this situation because I really want to get the weirdness of the situation across the audience. I want them to accept it as a situation and not question it so much. The faster you introduce something to the audience, there's like kind of this little period of time at the start of a story where the audience will just accept anything you tell them without questioning it. After a certain period of time, now the audience is full of questions, so, like if in the first minute, everyone's a vampire, the audience will just accept that and go with it. And then later on, you don't have to, explain too much if you bring in a werewolf. But if, you don't have any vampires or werewolves and all of a sudden you bring in one, like, near the end of the movie, and there wasn't one previously, now the audience is like, well, where does this vampire come from? It doesn't make any sense. What makes sense to them is going to sort of be established soon. So I'm going to kind of, again, you might do things slower than what I'm going to do, but I'm going to move in real fast. And also the thing I want to do is I want to sort of prefigure or establish the monster a little bit. So the monster in my story is the Sandman, this sort of creature called the Eye Collector. He's sort of a cross between the Sandman and the Man in the Moon. And then I'm going to have the story Father tells be about the Sandman. But, not the Sandman that, we kind of know, but like the sort of strange, nightmarish, horror version of the Sandman. So, and in my particular instance, I'm basing this kind of loosely, it's very kind of inspired and loosely based on an old short story by E.T.A. Hoffman. So I'm going to actually use some of the description of the Sandman in that story. So I'm going to jump to my screen here. Let's share screen. And I'm just going to write a story. So I'm going to start with, writing fade in. Fade in is just a convention that you often will write at the start of a story. We're going to go interior, living room. I'll call it the Ballantine living room because I may, go to another character's living room later on in the story. It's day. I'm just going to make that night now that I think about it. So I want to start with an image, right? I'm always trying to think of like, what's the image that I want to establish as quickly as possible. This is a movie called The Eye Collector. I want to establish a motif of eyes, right? What the Sandman character, Man in the Moon figure does is he collects people's eyes and they kind of fuel that he kind of wants people's eyes. He takes them, he makes deals for them. They kind of fuel his dark magic, this kind of this surreal, supernatural thing. So let's just start with an I. Nathan is the character I want to first figure out. The first person I want to introduce us to. So we're going to have, in this example, we'll just start with, Nathan's eyes. And again, he's up late. He doesn't want to go to bed. His mother wants him to go to bed. So if we're looking at Nathan's eyes, let's imagine we're tight looking at his eye. Maybe we're seeing like a television reflected in the eye, right? He's watching TV and then mom's going to turn it off and send him to bed. So, light flickers across the surface. Now I'm going to introduce him. So I capitalize it. Black and white. Television screen. Notice how that's a close-up, right? It's an extreme close-up probably, but I'm not saying extreme close-up, right? I don't have to put all that camera language in. It's not my job and it doesn't read well. I just want to get the idea across. Now I've said Nathan once, so now I'm to lowercase. I'm gonna make him 11 years old, maybe. Some old classic horror film. I'm not saying what film it is because I don't have the rights to any of this stuff, right? It'll be whatever film is cheap. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to say something and lock us into that, Some crackly. Of actually would capitalize crackly. So he's watching television. We have the thing. He turned off the television. Hang on, go to, I always forget which number is what, because I tend to copy paste to another program here, mother. I want to describe the mother a little bit more. So notice I'm just kind of describing them with a little, when you describe a character, you can be a little bit more artsy and like vague. You don't want to be too precise in the descriptions unless they really matter, but you want to get across maybe kind of what the tone is. Because again, you're sort of like setting forth a little bit, who these people are. Who they are. I'll put haughty. No, I can't remember how to spell haughty. There we go. I think this is the Canadian spelling, and they want the American spelling. I should probably use the American spelling. It's typically I'll add Valentine and Valentine's to my thing. Okay, so I'll just turn it off. Nathan's going to protest. Here's something, I'll just write this all out. So here's something that people do a lot in scripts. They'll write 2 lines like this. And one line is just the subtext of the other line. So you can see, like, I could just delete, that line now contains the other line in its subtext. Now, I know because I'm writing the script and because I planned out in advance, I know the next scene or one of the next few scenes that I'm not going to write here. But a scene that's going to happen shortly is because Nathan is going to bed a little later than normal, he's going to hear this man enter the house and clomp, clomp, clomp down the hallway. He's not going to know who this is, but he's going to hear somebody, a stranger, enter the house and clomp down the hallway towards father's study. Because I know that, this is one of the great benefits of planning and outlining, right? Because I know that's a scene that's coming up soon, I can have mother say something like this: "I've let you stay up too late already." Now that makes sense in the context of what's going on. Like, it makes sense as a thing mother would say to Nathan. But in retrospect, if someone would watch this thing twice or read the script twice, what they're going to realize is mother knows that this stranger is coming. Mother knows she's got to get Nathan in bed and to sleep before this person comes, or Nathan's going to hear them and Nathan's going to know about them, right? So this line has a subtext and a resonance that it's only possible for me to write into it because I have done the outlining. So in fact, I'm going to heighten that by having her do something. She taps her feet. I would normally give mother a name. In this case, I don't have a name for mother. I'm just going to keep calling her mother. Whatever I call her has to be consistent. In this film, Nathan, she's never really going to be referred to by her name. I know. But even if I do refer her by name, that's fine. She can have a name elsewhere, but in the script, I got to call her the same thing always. So I'm going to call her mother always. I'm just going to call father, father. I'm just going to put that in its own line for emphasis. Now, what I'm doing here is I've had mother say Sam is coming, time for bed, which doesn't seem too strange and sinister. It's just the kind of thing, mom might say to a young kid. Maybe I'll make this kid a little younger. I'll even make him 8. Right? I mean, I might keep him 11, but I'm just gonna wear with that later. I always get confused which grade would be what. So 5 would be kindergarten, 6, 7, 8. It's probably right. Maybe I'll make him 9. I like the look of the number 9. Now, Sandman is coming doesn't seem strange up here, but I'm going to have him repeat the Sandman is coming. Now the Sandman has escalated from being just a banal thing people say, a figure of speech, to now here's been personified is a person that we're talking about, who's going to actually come. And of course, keep in mind, I know that there's going to be a stranger entering the house and walking down the thing. Nathan, inside of his room is going to think, well, this must be the Sandman, right? So it's so much easier to layer these things in to your scene when you actually know the next scene. Even if you don't have it all figured out, you have the idea. If you broke the story, you've got the outline. You can kind of make ends meet a little bit in terms of having it cycle back around. Here's another just sort of basic tip. So one thing that so there's 2 basic rules, like things that I want to do in any scene. One is I need to establish the conflict quick. So as fast as possible in this scene, what has happened, right, is, Nathan's watching TV, mother turns it off. She tells him to go to bed. Nathan doesn't want to go to bed. Now those 2 are in conflict, right? And then it starts to escalate. Nathan can't do too much because he doesn't really have any power in this scenario to stop from going to bed. So he just kind of has to go along with it, but he can be, petulant and whiny about it, right? That's his sort of retaliation, but it's not really effective, right? It's not stopping anything. Mother's getting her way, right? So I need something else to kind of happen to complicate the scene, because the scene's that conflict is kind of over, right? Nathan's doing it. She's delayed a little bit. He tries another tactic to delay, and she's just moving him along. So now I got to bring the father in, right? I got to bring another character in, because Mother and Nathan, they've kind of resolved their conflict in the sense that Mother's won. But now the father comes in. So the father is now delaying Nathan. But note the dynamic here. So now the father is delaying Nathan, and now father is sort of on Nathan's side against Mother, right? In terms of he's not going to go to bed yet. I'm going to tell him a little story first. But notice that father and Nathan are going to start to seem a little bit at odds, because Nathan's father's grabbing him. Father's going to kind of frighten him with this story. Now Nathan kind of wants to get away from father and go with Mother. Is sort of the dynamic here, right? So the character's dynamic is sort of shifting and changing a little bit. I always have to have these characters. If I've got more than 2 characters in a scene, really any number of characters you got in a scene have to be at cross purposes. You always need to kind of limit the amount of characters you have to the amount of goals that they are kind of going to be cross purposes about. If you have 2 characters on the same side cleanly, like if they're basically want the exact same thing and are trying to do the exact same thing and so on and so forth, what's happening is they just start duplicating each other's function, and you can remove one of them and clarify the scene to make it better. In this case, they're starting to they're all sort of working at their own purposes, and they're all kind of working against one another a little bit. So Mother's, now it's now Mother against father a little bit, and Nathan's, kind of a bit of passive by the center. So father's going to start telling a story. Know what the Sandman does, don't you, boy? The other thing I'm doing here, by the way, on a meta level, is I'm establishing to the audience who my Sandman is. This isn't the Sandman that you think you know. This is more like a boogeyman figure. So the line, "I'm father is trying to be playful, isn't any good at it." That's just that has a bit of flavor to it, but it's really just telling us like, the father's not being playful. It may, it's kind of a direction to the actor to like, there's a weird lot, strange balance I want you to strike here between like, is he serious, or is he not? Nathan House close to mother, shakes his head. So Nathan's like saying no and hiding, huddling into mother. He's scared, right? I'm not saying Nathan is scared. I'm showing an action on the screen that's going to relay to the audience that Nathan's scared. So again, always kind of thinking about that visual a little bit. So now father's going to continue. Now it's boring when characters just are talking to one another, so I need him to kind of maybe do something. So here I'm just trying to like locate the characters in space a little bit in a way that sort of suggests to some degree how they relate. Note that what I'm doing here is I'm just sort of I've ratcheted things up. Again, I've got a conflict. It's a simple conflict in the sense about them going to bed and everything, and father wanting this, mother wanting that, them kind of being at cross purposes, and then it keeps escalating. You've got to always be escalating the conflict and making it get bigger and bigger and bigger in the scene, and then you can kind of deflate and diffuse it. Eventually, eventually the conflict resolves, but it's got to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it reaches the highest escalation point. The highest escalation point, of course, for this whole thing is mother hits father. If father's starting to scare mother, mother hits him, and makes him stop. Father, says something in kind of defense. Now they're kind of facing off. The question is sort of, will it continue to escalate? Will father hit mother, right? Which has a whole different tenor. Or what? Well, what's going to happen here is father's going to back off a little. So the how father backs down is he's going to give in to mother, right? To what mother wants. So I'm not going to have him hit her, and I'm going to have him back her down, let her have what she wants. He's going to say something, and she's going to react like she's been hit, right? So whatever the backstory here is exactly, um, we'll find out. We'll get more about this dynamic. We'll get more about that study, right? I'm also setting up the study as a location that Father goes at night. Again, this is later where this, Salmon's going to be walking to when Nathan hears the footsteps in the hall. Then I'll have Father just leave the scene here. So there we go. There, my scene's over. So I've actually got it in 2 scenes. I thought maybe it'd be 3, but I managed to get it all happening in 2 scenes. That's a pretty decent size scene. Almost all your scenes will end up being 1 to 3 pages. There's exceptions, of course. One of the most impressive exceptions I've ever seen is in the movie The Witch. We have this massively long scene that never flags for its drama and excitement. It's incredibly tense and impressive scene, and it's very, very long, but almost always we're talking about 1 to 3 pages for scenes. 2 pages is a nice length for a scene that has a lot going on. So again, this is what I mean when I say there's a very economical style of writing. You're trying to say a lot in a little. You're trying to get a lot across with visuals. You're just suggesting sort of the nutshell of the visual, right? You're not giving a lot of details for these visuals, just getting at the heart of what's being said, what's being seen. Look at, let's just go quickly over some of it, right? Just take a glance and notice that, like, this is my longest paragraph, pretty much, right? Where I'm describing characters, or there's a couple things happening. Every other paragraph is 2 lines, 1 line. This is my longest piece of dialogue, a speech that Father gives, telling us a story of the Sandman. Every other line of dialogue is 1 line, 2 lines, and even the 2 line, 3 lines here. I might even strip some of that back when I go to edit it, right? No, look how short it is. The other thing to note, basically is just the brevity of that, the brevity of it, and how everything is keyed to escalating the conflict. So quick as possible, within a few lines, set forth the conflict. Then every beat, every action reaction pattern is about how do I escalate the conflict? How do I get, these characters, acting and reacting to one another in such a way that we're not repeating anything. So if Nathan asks to stay up longer, Mother says no, he doesn't ask to stay up longer anymore. He changes the tactic, a new beat. Well, I haven't brushed my teeth. It's like, well, hurry it up, right? Action, reaction. Then they start to move. He's not, negotiating anymore. That's done. Then Father comes in. Father grabs the hand. Then his father starts to talk. Then Father starts to move, forward. And then Mother, has to smack his hands away because he's getting too close. And then he's going to stand, and as if he's going to, there's a moment where it seems like he might hit, and then he kind of backs off. Then he has the word hit, right? And then he's gone. So it's very, action reaction. Those beats are very tight. We don't have a lot of repetition, right? Nathan's not asking 5 times. Father's not, trying 8 things, right? It's just he starts on a path, he escalates that path. And I find that escalation in the scene is the most significant thing that you always have to keep in mind. If characters are, if things are always escalating, it tends to work better than if they're not escalating. So if Father starts talking and he's sitting in the chair, by the end of it, I want him to be standing up, right? If Nathan's starts kind of against Mother, by the end of it, I want him to kind of be, to Mother for protection. There's a bigger thing that's there's a bigger problem in this house than just, Nathan has bigger problems than just his bedtime, right? This dynamic itself has a sort of sickly nature, and there's some real problems here before we introduce our monster, because the monster is, of course, in a horror story many times just going to reflect the core of the situation that's already there. So I hope this little lesson was helpful. Have some notes before you start drafting your scene. Have a sense of the point. Have an idea where it fits in the story. Have maybe a couple things you want to accomplish. I want to set forth the claustrophobic tone. I want to set forth the three main characters. I want to establish the dynamics between those characters. I want to introduce the sort of a motif of eyes, and I want to prefigure who the eye collector is, who the Sandman is, what sort of establishes, and I just want to throw the audience into it. I want it to be not a slow starter, right? Whereas you might, in your story, want more of a slow start.